Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating. We've got our hands on a collection of personal journals, but let me stop you right there. These are not your average Dear Diary entries. What we're actually looking at is a space where raw, really intense human emotion just collides head-on with rigorous academic analysis. The author is literally using complex scientific and psychological frameworks to try and survive their own mind. It's like watching someone build a bridge over a storm, you know? It's a beautifully structured attempt to find meaning in all the messiness of life, and I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this. To make sense of this beautiful, complex web of thoughts, we're going to break it down into 5 chapters: the chaos of the mind, finding order through psychology, quantum physics and emotion, navigating the external system, and finally, the architecture of adaptation.
So Chapter 1, The Chaos of the Mind, Confronting the Raw Reality.
Right, so before we dive into the heavy academic stuff, we really have to ground ourselves in the author's reality. We're looking at immediate, overwhelming emotions centered around a really struggling relationship. The stakes here, they're incredibly personal. Take a look at the juxtaposition on this page. It is wild. On one hand, you have the author grappling with these intense, agonizing feelings about their partner, Sarah, writing about pushing her away, the pain of it all. But then, right next to those raw confessions, they are literally sketching out flowcharts. They're connecting these messy, painful relationship dynamics directly to chaos theory. It's like they're trying to build a logical bridge over this absolute ocean of unpredictable emotion.
There's a quote here that just completely nails this vulnerability. They write, "On one side, I have the paranoia and knowing speaking all the hurt I caused Sarah. On the other, my depression and past issues with feelings. I'm battling both." Wow. You see, this isn't just theory for them. This is a very real, dual internal battle. They are fighting tooth and nail to secure a future, literally trying to rationalize their way out of a psychological trap.
Moving on to Chapter 2, Finding Order Through Psychology, the Analytical Toolkit.
So, faced with this intense internal battlefield, how exactly does the author fight back? Well, they turn to this deeply ingrained analytical toolkit. The sheer volume of qualifications listed out here is honestly staggering. We're talking everything from fundamental counseling skills and diversity in ethics, all the way up to unpacking highly complex conditions, things like PTSD, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. This completely establishes their profound capability. They aren't just taking random guesses at how the human mind works. They've spent years formally studying the whole shebang. And now, they're turning that intense academic lens squarely on themselves.
And you can really see how objectively they apply these tools. Here, they're neutrally weighing the pros and cons of person-centered counseling, or PCC. They point out the obvious benefit, right? The idea that the client is the ultimate expert on themselves and can explore their thoughts without judgment. But then, they balance that right against the cons. They specifically note that a client-led approach means the client might not actually be in a stable enough place to make rational decisions or process things safely. That is a remarkably clear-eyed, almost clinical assessment of where therapy actually has its limits.
They even dig deep into the history of psychology itself. The author defines structuralism by bringing up its founders, Wilhelm Wundt and Edward Titchener. They note how it explores exactly what parts of the brain are responsible for specific sensory experiences. You know, like what fires in the brain when you watch a sunset or smell fresh coffee. They are literally breaking down the history of psychology just to understand the nuts and bolts of perception. They want to know the why behind what we feel.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Quantum Physics and Emotion, Blending the Sciences.
Now this next part, this might actually be the most fascinating aspect of these journals. It's this totally unconventional but honestly brilliant blending of hard sciences with abstract human emotion. Under a heading they've literally called The Bridge, the author attempts to connect quantum mechanics to the human mind. No way, right? But they do it. They use the concept of wave-particle duality as a metaphor to explain potential energy and personal baggage. Think about it. Just as a particle exists as a wave of probabilities until it's observed, the author views the mind's potential as a kind of energy. Energy that can either drag you down with past baggage or propel you forward. It is just such a wildly creative way to intellectualize emotional weight. Then we stumble upon this incredible little sketch. The author is mapping out the fundamental differences between a human and an AI. They're literally diagramming the pathways of growth. It's amazing because they're zooming all the way out from their own personal relationship issues to question the very nature of human consciousness versus, a programmed machine.
So look at how they contrast these two things. On the human side, growth is defined by learning and having many paths to take. It's chaotic. It's open-ended. But then you look at the AI side, and growth is strictly this closed loop of memory, logic, and ultimately financial output. By mapping this all out, the author's really highlighting a deep philosophical questioning of human nature. They are actively embracing the messy, error-prone many paths of being human over the cold, predictable loop of a programmed system.
But wait, they don't just stay up there in the philosophical clouds. They apply this rigid academic structure to the most mundane, everyday moments imaginable. Look at this 5-step log. It reads exactly like a textbook cognitive behavioral therapy exercise. The situation? A completely mundane argument over paying for a gas and electric meter card. Seriously. So they track their thoughts, noting they had a solid reason to be annoyed. They log their emotional and physical state. Then, the action, they make the conscious choice to just let it go. And the impact? It stopped an emotional spiral and kept honesty in their relationship. They're literally using clinical de-escalation steps in real time to save a Tuesday night argument.
All right, Chapter 4, Navigating the External System. Society under the microscope.
So now, panning out from their own internal world, the author starts applying that same intense, analytical laser focus to external societal structures. In these notes, they zero in heavily on the failures they see in the mental health and disability systems. They actually jot down statistics about disability tribunals, pointing out an 87% success rate for people fighting to get support. Basically, they're implying the initial system rejects people who genuinely need the help, forcing them to go through this whole grueling tribunal process.
They even went as far as sketching out their own graph to visualize this immense frustration. Charting the wait times for a doctor's referral, they note this huge, stark jump from a 4-month wait up to a full year. And you have to think, for a mind that is just constantly buzzing, constantly analyzing, and seeking immediate resolution, these systemic delays, they must add a massive, crushing layer of external stress on top of their internal chaos.
And it's really poignant how they connect that external friction right back into their own internal biology. They write about how our environment dictates validation, and they link that environmental feedback straight to the neurotransmitter serotonin. They even throw in the term quantum entanglement to describe how our actions and our negative emotions are deeply, inescapably tied to the environment we grow up in. Basically, if the environment is broken, the biology is going to suffer right along with it.
Which brings us to our final section, Chapter 5, The Architecture of Adaptation, a System Reset.
After all of this intense analysis, analyzing relationships, psychology, quantum physics, society itself, the author finally arrives at this incredibly powerful conclusion about their own mental architecture. They write a page starkly titled Last Will and Testament for Chaos / the Self-Awareness. Now, don't worry, this isn't a literal will. It's actually a brilliant, metaphorical system reset for their own psyche. They're finally realizing that being hyper-aware of every single emotional and psychological mechanism is it's becoming way too heavy to carry.
And then they write this absolutely profound sentence. Because broken hearts, when not self-aware, can be mended due to not seeing what was broke. Actually, let's just let that sit for a second. It is the agonizing paradox of self-awareness. When you analyze absolutely everything, you see every single microscopic crack in the glass, right? And that makes it so much harder to just simply move on. Sometimes in the realm of heartbreak, ignorance might actually be a kind of bliss.
So, if they are completely resetting their mental system, what tools do they actually choose to keep? Well, from that massive list of dozens of qualifications we saw earlier, they narrow it all down to their core surviving foundational skills: metacognition, self-awareness, self-regulation, time management, and finally, adaptability. They make a point to note that adaptability is the single most important skill they possess. When the dust settles, adaptability is the ultimate survivor of their mental chaos. These journal entries eventually culminate in this sort of final, peaceful surrender to the uncontrollable forces of life. They write, "They choose this and leave to fate what life may bring and not make my own fate." It's huge. They are consciously choosing to step away from that relentless, exhausting need to analyze, control, and predict every single outcome using theories and formulas. They're basically choosing to put the pen down and just live.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on today. We've just watched a journey of a mind capable of truly breathtaking analysis. But it begs a massive question. If absolute self-awareness just ends up revealing all of our broken pieces, is true healing actually found in the relentless analysis? Or is it found in finally letting go of the need to control the chaos? Thank you so much for exploring this incredible mind with me today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you on the next explainer.